Shalom, my friends. We come this week to what is surely one of the most disturbing and difficult of all our biblical literature, at least from our perspective as 21st century Reformed Jews. We're reading a Torah portion called Pinchas, named for its title character, Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, and the grandson of Aharon, Aaron, who of course was the first high priest of Israel according to our literary tradition. Pinchas catches an Israelite bringing a Midianite woman over to the camp. And what ends up happening is this Midianite woman, who happens to be the daughter of a prominent Midianite chieftain, ends up having sexual relations with a very prominent Israelite man in public view. And Pinchas, when he catches them in the act, runs into their tent and takes his spear and stabs them both through the belly, gutting them utterly. It's a grisly and dramatic end to their gross and vulgar affront to Israelite morality, not just because it was an interfaith relationship, but also because of the immodesty with which it was perpetrated. So that's actually, interestingly enough, relegated to the previous Torah portion. That happens at the very end of Parshat Balak, which was read last week. But you got to know it because we pick up the storyline right in the middle of that episode at the beginning of Parashat Pinchas. And there we find that not only is Pinchas praised for his act, he's actually given special merit. He's rewarded with an eternal covenant of priesthood, and also a brit Shalom, which means a covenant of peace. So he's given kind of a lineage of priesthood in perpetuity, and he's also rewarded with this interesting phrase, a brit Shalom, a covenant of shalom or peace. I find this passage extremely difficult because while I don't wish to preach against the Torah, I find it hard to regard Pinchas as an unadulterated hero, pardon the pun. His heroism, in my mind, is severely mitigated, perhaps even corrupted entirely, by his religious extremism. Pinchas is, after all, the model of the Zealot par excellence, and our own relationship as liberal Jewish thoughtful people should, with zealotry, with religious extremism, should give us pause. After all, what does Pinchas really do? He catches two people in an offensive act. He takes matters into his own hands, and with extreme bloodthirst and violence puts an end not only to their act, but to them. And for this he's rewarded. We should all regard this with a measure of discomfort, and I think we do. And I would like to posit that even the Torah itself may have had some discomfort with Pinchas. So his heroism, I believe, is challenged by a few features of the literature itself, perhaps tucked away just beneath the surface. The first I've already observed for you, which is that the deed itself is relegated to the very tail end of the previous week's Torah portion. Now, the divisions in the Torah came much after the canonization of the writing itself. So what's interesting here is that some rabbi or committee of rabbis must have made a deliberate decision to put the ugly deed itself in the very final verses of the previous portion, but in the portion where Pinchas is rewarded, we actually have that merit spoken about Pinchas very much divorced from the act itself. Perhaps this bespeaks some of our tradition's discomfort with Pinchas, and especially its discomfort with linking such a bloody and zealous act to what appears to be such merit, such reward. Secondly, it's been pointed out that Pinchas's name is phrased in a less usual manner. When he's mentioned both at the end of last week's portion, at the beginning of this week's portion, he's not just Pinchas, he's not even Pinchas ben Eleazar, Pinchas the son of Eleazar. He is Pinchas ben Eleazar ben Aharon, stressing the man's lineage to his illustrious grandfather, Aaron the high priest. And what is the characteristic for which Aaron was most renowned, was most distinguished? It is, in fact, the pursuit of Shalom. Our tradition is replete with references to Aaron as a peacemaker. We are taught, be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing it. In fact, Aaron's desire always to make peace seems to have gotten him in quite a bit of hot water. If you think about the episode of the golden calf in which Aaron was complicit at best and really an accessory at worst, we might understand that such complicity with idolatry was motivated by Aaron's peacemaking nature. So on the one hand, you have Pinchas, the fiery, bloodthirsty zealot, and on the other hand, every time he's mentioned, we're reminded of his grandfather who loved peace, perhaps loved peace to a fault. And then, of course, we're reminded in the third little hint that the covenant of priesthood is added to a brit shalom, a covenant of peace. That word shalom coming up more than once in reference now to Pinchas, as if to say, Pinchas, we thank you for your heroic deed, but what we really need from you now is an attitude and an approach that is motivated more by shalom. It seems to me that such is the fate of the religious extremist in our world, of the zealot, that person, by choosing a path of self-righteous and self-motivated action, presuming to speak in the name of the Most High, actually relegates him or herself to a place of extreme loneliness. One of the other great zealots of the Bible is Elijah, and we learn that after Elijah slew 400 prophets of Baal, the enemy god, the enemy deity, lowercase g, lowercase d, that Elijah finds himself utterly alone. There's a death sentence on his head. He flees to God's mountain and he encounters God and realizes that his zealous action for the Almighty has cast him out, isolated from every other person. So what do you think the fate is of the zealot in our world? Does religious extremism relegate a person to a life of utter isolation, of an inability to exist in a world where shalom can bring people together? I sure do.